Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. In today's episode, you'll hear a conversation that I had back in June with Aidan Reilly, co-founder of the FarmLink Project. He and his buddy James Kaneff were home from college because their campuses had been shut down as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. They'd seen on the news that billions of pounds of produce were going to waste during the pandemic, while millions of Americans were going hungry because they'd been furloughed or laid off. Within days, these two college students had called their friends, called some farmers, and called some food banks, and created a nonprofit organization called the FarmLink Project, which connects farmers to food banks and is committed to alleviating the ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, as of December 15th, the airing of this episode, the FarmLink Project has delivered more than 17 billion pounds of produce via truck, car, or plane across the U.S. As we approach the end of the year, there are still millions of people who are struggling to put food on the table because they've been laid off or furloughed. The pandemic has hit us hard. I hope my conversation with Aidan inspires you to go out and help support your local food bank, or support one of your friends or family, and or gives you the opportunity to find somewhere that you can find food yourself. I appreciate you listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. We're all about supporting those who are doing great things in food and beverage to help each other and to feed each other. Thanks for listening.
I'm great. We're working hard.
From everything that I see on your social media and the news, I mean, my God, you're in the New York Times, you're on ABC, you're on NBC.
I know. We've been actually really, really fortunate that news channels have wanted to pick up what we've been doing, because I guess we forgot how many people watch the news, and we just have, yesterday was ABC, and they did a very generous piece on us. And we just had thousands of people reach out and say, hey, we love what you guys are doing, or we want to help, or here, I would like to volunteer, or here's my donation. And it's just like, that's what we run on. Basically, that's our, that's our fuel, is people like that all over the US.
Right.
It's been awesome.
That's fantastic. I guess the first question I want to ask you is, you and I saw the same broadcast that they were pouring milk out onto the ground and retilling food back into the ground because they had nowhere to send it. And I called my friend Heather in Atlanta, and I'm like, okay, we've got to do something with this, because we're meeting planners. We have convention centers. We have hotels with these huge kitchens in it and thousands of staff that could make food from that food. So Absolutely. Why can't we connect? I mean, when you saw those stories, so you called James and said, we need to do something about them.
Yeah. I think we had gotten home from school, and, obviously very disruptive. I mean, coming home right getting in the swing of the semester. I was just about to have midterms. Then suddenly I'm back home and sitting in my room all day. At the same time, just kind of web surfing a lot, probably an unhealthy amount, just kind of, spending too much time on devices. And I kept reading these articles about, the ones that you mentioned, the New York Times article about the farmer Shay Myers in Idaho burying onions, and the other farmers in Idaho bearing potatoes, and like millions and millions of pounds. We also had a personal connection to a food bank in Los Angeles that we had worked at when we were younger, and I had worked at in high school. And we knew that they were burning through months of food supply as the country, as layoffs were occurring all around the country. New people were coming to food banks, and food banks were used to serving 300 people a week. We're serving 1,500 people a week. It was looking grim. And we thought, okay, this is a gigantic problem, but let's try to connect one of these farms from the New York Times article, for example, with this food bank. And we did that. That was our first shipment. Was what we did is we cold called the farmer and we said, hey, we heard you have a bunch of onions. What is the minimum amount of cost we can pay you so that it's economically viable for you to not bury these onions and instead ship them down to Los Angeles to this food bank? And that came out to around $1,000 for 50,000 pounds of onions. So we've raised that. Yeah. Yeah. And which we were like, okay, well, we need to do this. And we raised the money through friends and family. We got $1,000. We paid it. We arranged it to happen. We said, okay, this is an extremely dire situation. I mean, these farmers are literally burying their food, and they're willing to pay. Many of them are willing to pay just above, just the amount that they can use to give their employees a paycheck, and so that it's, some farmers bury it because it's more economically viable than it is to give them away. We're like, we'll want to pay just above that, and then you can get a tax write-off. We'll give it to a food bank. And so it became a repeatable process, and the rest is kind of history. I mean, we've been exponential. I mean, we've brought on, there was 2 of us at first, and then 4 of us, and then 10 of us, and then 20 of us. Now there's 170 of us, working on that same sort of process, basically, calling food banks, calling farmers all over the United States. Now we have very much of a research sector of that informs our decisions and where we give food and where we get food so that we can have the highest impact. We have just a ton of smart, not just students anymore, but just people who they something happened with their job, as has happened to millions of people around the country. They were furloughed, or they were in between jobs at the time, and now they were stuck, and they said, I want to come help you. I have 10 years of experience in agriculture, for example. Taking those people in to learn more and learn now how we can be most effective with the platform we have. So that's translated into like an exponential amount of food moved each week. Now it's we're at about 1 million pounds a week, and we could do more. Yeah.
And so how much have you donated so far?
How much we've donated, sometimes it changes every day. I got to find it on the website, but it's about $300,000. And that's something important to us, is that 100%. I'm looking on our website right now. We have, we took it off. Anyways, it's about $300,000, and that's been all through donations from people around the country. Nobody at our organization has taken a cent. And that money has been 100% spent on finding food to food banks.
That's fantastic. And I was looking on your website, so you have a great map. And you guys I think your website is much broader in scope than it was a couple of weeks ago when I first looked at it. So you've gotten some web guys to help you, which is awesome. Yeah.
I can take absolutely zero credit for that website. I did not code one line of it. But we've lucky enough to have guys come on who are computer science majors or coded websites before. And, and they're just, they work every day. We call them our DevOps team, and they make it, they work every day to make the website sort of coherent and easy to look at and easy to understand. There's a lot of stuff on there right now, and we're working to make it every day, translate the message simply. Right. People can connect with it.
I think it's pretty clean and clear, and it shows your impact. And so there's that map on there. And the only thing I don't see is like the key to what the different colors are. So like California is bright orange. And then where I am in North Carolina, it's like a fainted, orange. Does that mean where you've had, and when you click on the state, you find out how much has been donated. Mm-hmm. So 87,800 pounds here in North Carolina. So that makes me want to get involved here in North Carolina. What can I do? I shop at the farmer's market every single week. Yeah. Where can they do? And I've got ton of farmer friends in Alabama and Georgia, where I used to live. So connecting you with them too. But how, all of these people in all of those states, they're just people that saw you on the news and wanted to help. And now because how are you connecting farmers to farm banks or to food banks?
So that key that does show kind of, where we've been most successful in moving food, and where and then places that we haven't yet gotten food yet. I think that's largely reflective of the growing seasons. And, we're calling indiscriminately. We didn't start by saying we're only going to help California, or we're only going to help New York or Washington, et cetera. I think maybe there was a natural bit of most of us are from California who are working on the many of us who started the project are from California. So I think that's where we naturally expanded outwards from. And there are just, the original reports we read were largely Oregon, Idaho, Washington. That's where the farmers were who had that. They hit them right in the middle of their like picking season. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones with the most surplus. That being said, the seasons change and we are able to, if we get an email from Arkansas, Florida, Michigan, anywhere in the country that says we need this food, we can get it to you. We now are large enough and we have 40 people working full-time on the farms team, organized. We call them in sprints. If we need to find food for a certain area, like we're going to be able to do it.
And I was talking to one of my farmer friends in Alabama earlier today, and she found out, because they sell direct to restaurants and, that has waned, but their CSA programs have gone, skyrocketed. But she found one restaurant was actually buying the food from them and then going and selling it in their own CSA program. So, but your program is just strictly directly to the food banks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's a lot of initiatives that are popping up. It was something pretty, one of the few silver linings about the terrible situation that the country's in right now is that it's spurring innovation. I mean, disaster spurs innovation, and it's allowing society to look pretty critically at some of the parts that were broken. And I would think it's quite fair to say that the food waste system is broken in the United States. We waste around 40% of the produce grown in the United States goes to waste. And at the same time, there are millions and millions of Americans who are going to bed hungry every night. And that obviously does not make not obviously, but it doesn't make any sense. And so we've tried to be very self-aware. But the thing is, there are organizations who have been doing this for a long time. So we wanted to come in and not reinvent the wheel, because we didn't want to come in thinking we're going to save the world without being cognizant of all the players in the space who have been doing this for years and they have their networks. And instead, we wanted to come and be self-aware about who we are and what we're good at and see how we can help those organizations. So what we found was what we're really good at is finding specifically surplus from farms that's very unique to the pandemic right now, and moving that bulk food and connecting it all over the country. So directly to food banks. And that's what we've been doing. We have not, there are organizations that work in like produce boxes, for example, USDA produce boxes, or they glean from restaurants, and restaurants give them food waste at the end of the week, basically. And then they take that and they package and they distribute on an individual level. With how quickly we wanted to just get started and get helping, the network we've set up, we decided there are other people who are much better at that than we are. We can give to them bulk, as opposed to breaking up and distributing. That's kind of the thing we've been going by here is be wary of indigestion, not starvation. And what we mean by that is not that we don't have enough it's not that we'll never not have enough. In order for FarmLink to succeed, it's not that we wouldn't have enough food waste to work with or enough food banks who might need. And by the way, I don't like calling it food waste, because this isn't waste. It's good, healthy food. It's just excess, food excess to work with, or food banks. Our issue would be taking on too much and trying to be too many things at once, to where we're spread too thin, and therefore we're not really helping anybody to the best of our ability.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. And, in the meetings industry, we are, and I talk about that in sustainable events, is we do waste 40% of our food in the United States. And my first realization of that was actually at the World Expo in Milan in 2015. And it was all focused on food. And when you walked into that whole event, the first thing that you walked into was a gigantic warehouse exhibition on food waste.
Yeah.
And it was mind blowing. I'm like, okay, so how can I go back to my world of event planning and, teach meeting planners, don't order too much food, understand your numbers, because we are throwing food away at the end of the day, because they don't want food to be seen as it's running out. But you've got those people who were at those events who are now going to the food banks because they've lost their jobs.
Yeah.
And so learning how to manage that. So it's like food rescue before it gets to be food waste.
Exactly.
And that's just so awesome. How many farmers and food banks are you working with now? Do you know? Or is that?
We're working with, it's going to be an estimate off the top of my head, but we're working with, I would say, in 29 states, I think it's somewhere around 40 farmers that we've worked with, and, somewhere around 100 food banks or so.
And the farmers are big, the commercial farmers versus the small mom and pop farms. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. They've got thousands of pounds of food to send.
Exactly.
And Doug, who's in Idaho, is your potato guy, right?
Yeah.
That was your first, your first delivery for him was 40,000 pounds of potatoes. Is that right?
Yes. Doug is amazing. And he's a perfect example of the types of farmers that we'd like to work with, or that we have been working with. And really the reason that we started with half of our mission statement being let's help out the farmers. he's just a third generation potato farmer in Idaho, just a big 6'6" guy who, usually is offloading like 10 trucks a week or more from his 400,000 pounds of potatoes. But then his supply chain just got completely destroyed. He basically contacted us, and he had a mountain of them in his basically his shed in Idaho. And he was like, can we work together to try to get these out to people who need it?
So he found you, or he saw you on television?
I think we might've reached out to him cold call.
Uh-huh.
And I actually remember getting the message first. It was like, we just found a farmer in Idaho who says he has an infinite amount of potatoes in his backyard, basically. And then we got to work on trying to, we ended up shipping, I think, 120,000 pounds out.
Wow. And so in the story on the Today Show with Al Roker, he actually asked about the president's signing the bill for $19 billion in funding to help these farmers in this, helping them relieve the challenges that they're having. Mm-hmm. And you said, you want to help the communities that are not getting that $19 billion.
Yeah.
And so can you explain a little bit about how you're doing that?
Yeah. Well, we're doing that with, like I mentioned, our research teams who are, data is a kind of our friend here. And the data on food deserts that are popping up we have to take a critical look at who's in the networks, who's in the Feeding America network, who mm-hmm. before it faced food insecurity and had some form of system of some sort of food bank system or redistribution system that the communities could go to. The thing is, with the amount of layoffs around the United States, and the just remarkable circumstances, there are new food deserts popping up that we need to take like fresh data on. And basically what we're doing is creating a map, so we can map out and pinpoint the most food insecure counties all over the United States. And then who are the food banks servicing those counties? And then those are the ones we target. Okay.
All right. So you go to Brown and you're studying mm-hmm. political science and government, right? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're supposed to graduate in May. So mm-hmm. how are you? Have you talked to your professors and like, can this business count as my last semester of school?
I honestly have not. Our school has been such a confusing thing for all of us. I don't even know if I'm going to be going back in the fall. I'll find out by the end of July, basically. But I think I will. And I think the schools have been a great resource for each of us, for all of us. That we have students from Stanford and Georgetown and USC and Brown, obviously, and Harvard, and just like great institutions all around the US that we've been able to reach out, and they can get us in contact either in their like newsletter for the week, or get us in touch with plenty of professors. We work with professors from Cal who can help us with that data end, like I was talking about. But yeah, I in terms of class credit, that's actually a good point. I should think about that.
So then on that same note, what do you want to, your thought on what you wanted to do with your degree before you started FarmLink, has that changed at all? And is FarmLink going to continue on past you going back to school?
Yeah, I actually, that's a good question. Before all of this, I really was going to work in entertainment was my main, that That's where I was headed. And, I think has changed a lot of our ideas of what we want to do in the future and where we could, what we can do in the future. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to stay on this project full time until we can see it through, till it can stand on its own legs and can continue to be useful in fixing this gigantic problem in the United States. But yeah, that's all I can say. I know for each and every one of us, many of us had nothing to do with food waste or food insecurity or logistics or anything like that before this project. And I think we're each realizing, wow, this is actually a really important space we could work in, and are going to put in as much time as we need to.
So what's the biggest thing that you've taken away from this?
The biggest thing I've taken away from this, I think, is that it's not, when you're faced with a problem that seems so big, you can't even wrap your head around it, that you can start somewhere. You need to just zero in and focus on where you can help and then build from there, as opposed to trying to digest it all at once, because then you're never going to be able to, you're going to get overwhelmed and you're going to die of indigestion, I guess. You know what I said? what I said, is that you can, even if you don't know anything about the space you're going into, as long as you come in with the right humility and the right resourcefulness, that you will be able to provide value and potentially help a problem. I think that's resonated with all of us here.
That's awesome. I know going step by step and taking those minor steps, I mean, where do you see FoodLink and your partnerships across the country going?
As the supply chain sort of repairs itself, and the farmers that we're talking to that had, for example, like Doug has a mound of potatoes in his shed in his backyard a month ago. Those farmers are slowly getting back on their feet. I mean, I can't speak as a representative to them because each and every one is different in each and every region, but the country is reopening now. Slowly. Restaurants are, who knows what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 weeks, but right. The last several weeks, it's been slowly reopening, and as restaurants been opening, et cetera, and supply chains are slowly repairing themselves. We've talked to farmers who, guys like Doug S, who had that surplus and who no longer have it. They're no longer willing to give away 50,000 pounds for $1,000, basically, because they either have demand again or they're expecting demand to pick back up. So, that being said, now it kind of is responsibility for us, because we have this organization. We now have I would call it a highly structured organization of 170 people who are working full time on this, with partnerships with Uber Freight and with the resources and connections we have. We're like, okay, how can we pivot to make sure that we're continuing to help this gigantic problem of food waste and food insecurity? So what we're doing actively right now is we're going to move into a different space of food waste and acutely target that. There are a lot of organizations we see around the United States specifically that target kind of the downstream food waste. And what I mean by that is the largest sector of food waste, aside from home, which is restaurant and supermarkets, et cetera. There are a lot of organizations that do a really great job of working with thousands of restaurants or supermarkets across the US and having drivers take the excess food from there to restaurants. We are going to look to target some of these areas that are not as acutely covered, these areas of food waste that are not as acutely covered by organizations, things like processing plants, things like packing houses, distribution centers. Mm-hmm. There's good, healthy produce that is basically sent to the landfill every week, hundreds of thousands of pounds from processing plants, et cetera, all over the United States. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing right now is we're learning as much as we can about the food waste system, so that we can see which one of these sectors is most ignored, and where can we now put all of our efforts, basically. Okay.
That's a great plan. And, I need to introduce you to my friends at the World Wildlife Federation too, because they're tackling food waste as well, a lot from the hospitality side. So that's, another, from the distribution centers to the hotels and convention centers, that's another thing, but I'll make that introduction to Pete, to you. But supply and demand for meetings and events, it's probably going to be the last market to come back, because we can't meet except for 10 people, right? Mm-hmm. Restaurants are going to be that. So one of the conversations that I've had with some chefs is that prices are going to go up because the demand is going to be lower. And, some of if Doug's replanting already, right, is he going to replant the same amount that he, projected from last year or from his sales last year? Have you guys gotten into any of that conversation?
Informally and briefly,
Okay.
but it's these farmers, we know they're no joke. I mean, they know their industry, and even in a time as unpredictable as this that they didn't plan for, they can look ahead and they can see, all right, we don't know what's going to happen in the next several months. Our distributors don't know, or the people we sell to, they don't know what's going to happen in the next couple months or year even. And they need to look a year ahead in order to do that planting, in order to see how much they're going to plant. What we're probably going to see is that is going to be a lesson. The farmers are going to react to the fact that, yes, there's going to be less demand and they're most likely going to plant less. I mean, the reason there's so much surplus and there is so much surplus right now is because they planted however many months ago in preparation for
their projections.
For the country to be open and that churning level of consumption. And that didn't happen. I would say that the farmers around the country are ensuring that that is not going to happen again, because they do not like to waste their food. One farmer called it like the worst day in his life when he had to bury 5 million pounds of his produce, basically. And yeah, I think they're going to do everything they can within their ability. They're very, very intelligent people that we spoke to, have it kind of down to a science. And it's hard to have it down to a science when you don't know what data you're working with. You don't know what the demand is going to be, but I think they're going to do everything they can to make sure that we don't end up in a situation like we've had the last couple of months with farm food waste.
Right. All right. So how can people help you?
People can help us. I mean, great question. Firstly, if people want to learn more about us, they got to go to our website, farmlink.org. And there they can learn everything. They can see what we do and how we do it. And they can see photos and stories from communities we've serviced. The best way they can help us then is there's also on the website a volunteer under the Get Involved. You can click Get Involved, and then depending on what it is you want to offer, the way you can help, you can click on one of those buttons, whether that's you want to volunteer, you want to start a fundraiser, you want to just donate you want to join the Facebook community so you can get updates on what we're doing. And if we say, hey, any volunteers want to go and help with this delivery here, then you can be a part of that group. That's all on the Get Involved section on our website that people can go find and look through themselves. And that is how we've, found the majority of the 170 people who work with us and the 2,000 plus volunteers who have signed up and are in our Facebook group. That's how we connect with people around the country.
Okay. And, asking that question too, there's a lot of, when events are happening, a lot of companies, when they go into a new city for their convention or whatever, they've got thousands of people or even, 50 or 100 people, corporate social responsibility. So they always want to find a fundraiser or a way to come to a facility, to a food bank. There's a lot of groups that go to food banks and just package food for people. Is that a way that meeting planners could potentially partner with you, is do that with their convention or their conference?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And again, just through that volunteer link on your website.
Yes. Or if there are any organizations or companies out who, I was asked to email me personally at Aidan at farmlinkproject.org.
Okay.
And then we can have a personal conversation about how it is we can work together.
Okay. I think it's going to be long in coming until we get a big group of people together for a convention. Yeah. But, anything that they can do, because I think people are, wanting to do things, virtually, and how can their employees help do a variety of different things. So, and they're convention goers too. So it would be interesting, as they do virtual events, how can they also give back to live projects like yours?
Yeah, completely.
So, okay, well, I don't want to take up any. You guys got a lot of work to do, so I appreciate your time. And on all social medias, it's FarmLink on all social media outlets.
Yeah. So on Instagram, we are FarmLink Project, and Twitter as well.
Okay, FarmLink Project. Gotcha.
FarmLink Project.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm really impressed by what you guys have done. Thank you for bringing to life what I thought about, but I didn't jump into it and do. I actually made a donation this morning of $500 to you guys. So, because I am really happy for what you're doing. But here in North Carolina, I think I submitted the information on how I can volunteer, but let me know what I can do while I'm sitting at home, not planning meetings here in North Carolina.
Absolutely will. And thank you for the donation. And thank you for talking to me today and kind of getting the word out. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.